Welcome to Thinker Growth Community Workshop Call Tuesday morning. Today's topic is: Are you really ready to be an entrepreneur? And what are the steps to determine whether you are ready? I've got Paul Edwards here and Naomi Alstrom. Welcome, guys, to the community call.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me too.
Well, you guys are faculty, and appreciate you showing up for this because you have such great insights always on this. And I know that it's been valuable for people because even in this past week, I've heard good feedback from the community calls, the workshop calls, and how being a part of the community has really impacted people's lives. Ryan is got some changes in his life. He's actually pushing further ahead, like fast and furiously, for launching his skincare product. And
Good.
we had a call on LinkedIn, a live workshop call with him last week. And then John and Kirk, super excited to be part of the community as well. They launched their product last week, and they're going to be on a LinkedIn Live tomorrow with me. So be sure to catch that if you can and share that around. So the questions,
And we should
yeah,
say quickly, Jason, for the benefit of those listening on the new Thinker
yes,
Growth podcast, that this is recorded sometime before you actually hear it. So don't go looking for Jason to be live on LinkedIn today if that's when you're hearing it, because that actually
Yeah.
8 weeks ago. It's a time warp thing. We believe
good
in
call.
time travel here at the Thinker Growth community, and so we're going back to the future. But anyway, please continue.
I love time travel. There was forget it. There was a
Never
movie
mind.
called Flight of the Navigator
Right? Yeah.
back when it was 1986. Flight of the
Mhm.
Navigator, great movie, was one of my favorites. And a little boy time travels. So I
Compliance.
was the little boy time traveling. You, golly, you remember all the references.
I
That's funny.
watched it several times. Yeah. Naomi doesn't know anything about this. She was born
Nope.
after the war. But anyway,
Sorry. Well, I think my camera's a little wonky.
All right. Well, the questions for today: Are you really
There we
ready
go.
to be an entrepreneur? And talking about people's feedback on your decision is a reflection of their story and not yours, as well as looking at this idea that the best possible feedback that you can receive is still biased in some way and only reflects this other person's journey, not necessarily yours. So, how do you figure out to what extent you listen to other people's feedback to make your own decision? What do you think, guys? This is a deep. You've both embarked on entrepreneurial journeys, and you've been with other people who have as well. What do you see?
People are very. I love this topic first of all because I think it's really easy to get caught up in the judgment, and I think we talked about that with Ryan a couple weeks ago. Like just getting caught up in that judgment of it, and being not necessarily being afraid of what people think, but the reality of when people come at you with their opinions, or you shouldn't do that. That's not going to work. Here's why, or that's not the right thing to be doing, or there's all of this. But I really love how you said there's always going to be some bias, and how do you know what you should listen to and how you should take action? And honestly, I don't think there is going to be a specific cut and dry answer because it's going to be very specific to the person and to the audience they're trying to get to. Because if they're trying to get to one kind of audience, then yeah, if it was someone from that audience who's giving them feedback, they're going to take that more seriously. But if it's someone from a obscure audience over here, no way. You know what I mean? Like maybe take it a little bit into perspective, but I don't know. And I really love what Paul said last week about reading the book about Obama and him listening to the people first so he could reflect what they were saying to him. I think being able to hear people out is extremely important and like sit with it and be able to address their concerns so they'll be, more trusting of you and your journey as you go towards what you're going towards. But ultimately, I think deciding what to listen to and what to take into account and what to take as feedback is just going to be dependent on the person. And that discernment, I think getting that discernment and being able to figure out how to use your own discernment, I think that's going to be the real challenge.
the these questions sort of are like a pinball machine, just bouncing off of one another, is how I've seen them, Jason. And the reason that I say that is, um, when I launched my very first book, please don't go and look it up. It's, it's one of those things that now looking back, I'm like, I have mercy on myself at that age, but I cringe at the same time reading it.
What's it called?
And it's, yeah, immediately everybody wants
Yeah,
to go look it up.
what's the infomercial version of that? I love it.
10
Shameless plug.
Secrets to Networking Success is the name of the book.
Catch my book here.
Yes. Now, I went full throttle on this as much as I could. I had recently been fired from my last insurance job, and so I was striking into entrepreneurship, and I said, I'm going to do a book launch. And I invited everybody I knew in Olympia, Washington, and I knew a lot of people because I had been in the insurance business for 6 years, and I had networked my butt off, and I had a whole bunch of relational capital I could tap into to get, nearly 100 people to show up for this thing. I learned yesterday reading that same book that I had a bigger first book launch than Barack Obama did. Barack Obama only had 30 people show up to his first book launch. I had nearly 100. So that's my claim to fame.
Wow.
But anyway,
I would ride on that for a while. That's
I
high
know,
five.
yeah, it says something.
Put it to your resume.
Now, here's the thing though. All of those people knew me and liked me, and many of them were clients or referral partners. So there was already a high degree of trust, familiarity with the author. So very few of the people who were at that launch were people I didn't personally know. There were a few who were invited by somebody that I personally knew, and that's the benefit of your network just having its own network. But it's got to be 90% of the people there were people I knew. And that made me think of a question I was asked at the time by a good friend of mine. And Jason, you're the only other person who's ever asked me. Something to the equivalent of, yeah, but what does the average person who doesn't know you from Adam think? How do they feel about this? And I think, although it's true that you can never fully eliminate bias from, getting a sense of whether or not you're ready to do something, one of the best things you could do is talk to somebody who doesn't have a freaking clue who you are, right? Or almost doesn't. Like, you're just a very surface level acquaintance, and you say, hey, could I ask you for 15, 20 minutes of your time? And I want to tell you what I'm thinking about doing. And you don't know me from Adam, and that's great. That's exactly what I want, is the opinion of a stranger or someone who's almost a complete stranger. This is the problem I think I've identified. This is the solution I think I can provide. And this is what it would make sense for me to charge for it, Do you think I'm way off base? Or do you think I'm like, maybe could use some work and then it would work? Or do you think I'm like right on target? Just off the cuff, what's your initial reaction? If we can learn to ask that question instead of going to our friends and, as you've said, Jason, your mother loves everything you do, right? It's it's nice to have the support of those people, don't get me wrong, but they are the least objective
Yeah.
Reference point, the least objective vector, if you will, to bounce that idea off of and say, is this worth doing? Am I dreaming this up in my head? Do I have no idea what I'm talking about? Or do you think there's something to it?
Yeah.
Yeah. You go.
I was letting that sit in for a little bit because it's true. We've talked about this before, that there's two types of people who will do business with you. One are the people who love you, and those people forgive all your sins. And then there are the people who are not yet sure they should love you, and they just judge you. And nobody wants to be judged. But I think that there are judgments that are criticisms designed to put you down, and then there are judgments that are criticisms designed to bring you up. And it's important to know, I think, the distinction between those two, because if it weren't for, like we talked about last week, I think, voice of the customer, if it weren't for voice of the customer, you'd have no idea what the customer wants. And your idea might indeed be crap, or at least be not hitting the mark. And if you're not hitting the mark, you're not going to sell very much, and you might be causing more disappointment than necessary. And I think we see that in our interpersonal relationships. And so maybe tying that back in with last week, entrepreneurship is one of the biggest opportunities for personal development that you'll ever find, because you have relationships with complete strangers who you want to serve, or you want them to engage with your product or service or message. And you then have to change yourself or change your product, service, or message in a lot of cases.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If I could do that story again of the book launch, knowing what I know now, one thing I would have done is called up people who I just barely knew, that I'd met recently, that I had not spent any time with. They might have heard about me. They might have, had friends say, "Oh yeah, Paul Edwards is the bee's knees," whatever, but themselves had not experienced it. And so it would be a very first interaction, and I would be putting something before them to say, "Look, this is what I'm thinking about doing." This, by the way, I want to just throw in a quick plug here for this is exactly what we're offering with the accelerator and sprint programs here in the community, is that um, you might be thinking this very thing yourself and you don't know who to turn to. And here are three people on this podcast who will look at what you're thinking about doing and tell you. And we don't know you very well. We can do our research. We can look you up on the internet, but we don't know you until we interact with you and we hear the story that drives what you're doing. And so much of that was missing from that experience for me with that book launch, which is why as soon as the launch was over, I never sold another copy, because the
Until
real,
now.
well, yeah, until now.
10 secrets to marketing. Wait, what is it? Network
10 secrets to networking
to
success,
network
available
marketing.
on Amazon.
Go get it. Come on. Jump those numbers up, guys.
Yeah. So
Well,
anyway,
well, when I first launched my book, What Could Be, it's Creating a Life of Meaning and Purpose. Find it now on Amazon. Now, when
Barnes
I
and
first
Noble,
launched,
wherever.
yeah, Barnes and Noble. When I first launched my book, in fact, before I launched my book, I asked for some feedback from folks, random folks online, and there was a random guy on TikTok who offered to read my manuscript, and we became friends through that, and he thought it was great. Then there was some lady on LinkedIn who I've known from I don't know what you call it, like a past life. She was my company had sponsored some things that she was at, and so she knew me tangentially, and she was super excited. And in one morning, 3 hours, it's like she got the manuscript, and within 3 hours or something like that, she blasted me up and down, beginning with something like, "Would you like my honest feedback or would you like polite Midwest feedback?" was her comment. And I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "You know what? Just give it to me. Whatever you got to say. I don't care." Like, because you can't offend me. It's fine. If you don't like it, you don't have to like it. And it was interesting because her feedback was, well, first of all, I'm not religious and you make religious references. And so we don't see eye to eye. Okay. Also, you normally read books by women because I find that they understand women, and you're a guy and you don't know what it is to be in the workforce. And then when you use this reference, you offended me beyond belief and I couldn't continue. And I was like, all right, so you're not my target market for one. You and I don't even speak the same vocabulary. You
Mhm.
don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't know what you're talking about because we've lived completely different lives. And you have already been offended because you don't read men. You only read female authors. So I was like, okay, so fine, blast me. You're not my target market. And so I had to evaluate in my mind. I've got on one hand people who are saying this book is great and it's changed the way I've thought about life, men and women, which is interesting, and asked great questions. And then on the other hand, I have this one person out there who's just bent out of shape about all sorts of things, countless numbers of things, which are fundamental to my arguments. And she's bitter. Like, okay, well, I can't change your bitterness. I'm not here to change your bitterness. You can do that. So it's interesting. I had to slice and dice that, take out her comments and go, okay, well, is there anything to learn from this? Should I change my message? And the answer is no, I shouldn't change my message because on the other hand, it's helping people change their thought processes and their lives. So it stays.
Love that. I mean, that kind of goes with what I was saying, that if it's not from your market, they're not going to take that. Don't, it's not worth it. It's just there to tear you down. And I love, okay, so I kind of want to marry the two ideas of the criticism to tear you down and criticism to build you up. I think there's like the happy medium where it's the tear down for your good. And so it like feels like a tear down, and it's hard to, sometimes this one's hard to listen to because usually it comes from somebody that does care deeply for you. Um, Someone who knows you very well and somebody who can give you a criticism that can tear you down, but ultimately will help you be better and in the long run will build you up. But in the moment, it feels like a tear down. And in the moment, it might have you questioning whether or not their bias is for you or against you. Um, and I think it's really, really important to take into account where those opinions are coming from, because it's very, if you have a rapport with somebody and it feels like a tear down, you need to make sure that you do think on it a little bit longer and maybe ask questions as to why or possible solutions they would like. Because criticism, I mean, there's a criticism that, is just, this is wrong. But then there's the one that's, this is wrong. Here's what I would do differently. And make sure you get that from them. If they don't have a solution, it's just a tear down. But if they have a, here's what I would do differently, then obviously they've been thinking about it and they've been thinking about your success. They've been thinking about ways to help boost you or things that you could do differently that would help you get to your audience in a more meaningful way, in a more piercing way.
And more nuanced still is that
Mhm.
sometimes this goes to two of the questions that we asked as we thought about this topic. Number one, how do you know to what extent you should listen and take action? And then just the general observation, right? That no matter how well someone means in giving you feedback, to some extent, to a degree, what they're always telling you is their story, not yours, their experience, not yours. And so, Naomi, what you were mentioning there was, if they don't have a solution, you can regard it as a tear down. I would mitigate that a little bit and say it may not be a tear down, but it may be the inevitable result of one person's story clashing with another, and that person just, I don't understand this. I can't get behind it. I can't get my head around it. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't square with my experience, and therefore I'm reacting to it negatively. And so sometimes, like, that's another parsing you've got to do is say, they criticize me about this, but did they criticize me about this because they know the right way to do it? Or because they don't know the right way to do it, but they're not tearing me down to make me feel you know, 2 centimeters tall. They're just reacting to it because viscerally, right? They, that takes them back to a time in their life where they couldn't solve that problem either.
Well,
And so
yeah,
anyway,
to that point, this woman who gave me this terrible, like, just tongue lashing through her keyboard, she ended her monologue with, um, "I'm sure your I'm sure your family's going to cherish this book." Something like that, which was to say, everybody's gonna think it's great, it's absolute crap, but, your family's gonna love it, which is the teardown. That was
yeah.
there's no redeeming value in this. You should go crawl in a hole. And what I got from that was, wow, that's how you talk to that's how you talk to a person who's kind of sort of a stranger. It's like, great. Well, when your filter's down, you might be talking to your family that way too, which is might be why you're bitter. And
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to participate in your bitterness. You didn't like it, fine. And yeah, my family might cherish it. I can think of an extended family member who does not cherish it and thinks and never even read it, and also gave me a tongue lashing about it too. Like, okay, well, we've never had a conversation about it, so I don't care
Yep.
about what do I what is your feedback to me? Very little, because again, balancing it. I think I like this idea of the bell curve, that everything exists on a bell curve, right? There's and I was going to draw it, but people watching or listening are going to see it anyhow. So on one hand, you have the people who really, really hate really hate you or your concept, right? And then on the other side, you have people who are just absolutely in love with everything that you do. And most people are right in between, right? So that bell curve goes up and comes back down. If you're too far balanced, or if you're unbalanced and too far on the side of everybody loves everything that you're doing, you're talking to the wrong audience. It's not
Yep.
possible. Likewise, if you're really on the wrong on the side of everybody hates what you're doing, there's something wrong too. However, for every person who loves everything that you're doing, there's probably going to be, and you should expect that somebody's going to hate what you're doing because it
Hmm.
needs to be held in balance, or you're not standing for anything. You might be the chameleon, becoming all things to all people, and really not standing at the end of the day for anything. Um, so I think your product really does you have to be okay, I think, with your product, service, or message being a little bit polarizing, and expect that as people love it, somebody's going to come out and hate it. And
Yeah.
that's okay. Don't discount, not that we want that, right? We don't want everybody to hate it, but it doesn't mean that something is inherently wrong. It could just mean that you're balanced.
Yeah.
It's true.
That's the whole point of polarity there is, first of all, to set yourself at, nobody can see this on the podcast, but at a direct opposite, but then gradually to work towards the middle with more and more people. Some people are going to remain at the opposite end of the spectrum no matter what you do. That's fine. That's to be expected. It's it's out of balance if it isn't. But polarity also causes that separation, and separation is where we get success, right? I know there are some products like the iPhone and all that that are, you might as well say they're universally successful. Everybody uses them. That's true. But for the average business owner, we are looking for some degree of polarity. We do want to parse out who we don't want to do business with. And if you've ever had a client from hell, you know why that's good wisdom.
So making this very practical for entrepreneurs, I think part of that process of determining whether to listen to the feedback or not is whatever they're giving feedback about fundamental to the success of your product or service. So I was shopping for a drying rack online on Amazon the other day, and I was like, well, they have these drying racks that fit over your sink, and I was like, well, that's a neat way to save some space. Uh, a lot of them have positive reviews. A lot of them look the same. There might be $5, $10 difference in price between them, but they look kind of like the same thing. Maybe all manufactured in the same factory in China. And so then I delved into the reviews. Right, some of those reviews indicated that there were construction problems with one of them, durability issues. That whatever material they were made out of, if it gets wet over time, the finish on it isn't quite right and it's going to rust. Okay, fundamentally, that's something that I care about, and the manufacturer I'm sure cares about. So that so so objectively, rather than subjectively, objectively, one product might be more durable than the other. That is fundamental to the success. The other one's available in black, one's available in white, one's available in wood, one's available in some other color. Not necessarily fundamental to the success of the product for me, but some people complain. Well, it wasn't the right color for me. I didn't like the color. Okay, all right. That is something that is subjective in nature. Is it fundamental to the success of the product? Maybe not. Was it worth complaining about online? Probably not. You 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 couldn't see
I
it
find
before
value
it
in
was
it. So
shipped.
yes.
Well, right. So I think there is something in the idea of parsing out what is fundamental to the success of the product, service, or message. Those things listen carefully to. The subjective things listen a little more lightly to, and figure out, is this important, or are they just not my customer?
Mm. Yep.
Or do they just have an axe to grind? Because there are people in the world who just are
Yeah.
cantankerous and have to complain about everything.
Like, and I kind of explain it like this, like, you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Like some people are so repulsed by your tea, and some people are always going to love your tea. And then there are people who will drink your tea occasionally. Those are the people who Like they'll accept the invitation to tea occasionally, and those are the people you're going to learn the most from because they're the people who will give you perspective about things that don't perfectly align with you, but they're also people who are going to not just find fault with it just because you rub them the wrong way. Um, that's where you're going to find the most value in that criticism
And in that
or
idea of
feedback.
self-development in entrepreneurship, what you're talking about there is there are things that need to sometimes we need to refine about ourselves. Like
Mhm.
you've always bring up the story that when you first met me, you thought, was I angry and something like that, just because of the tone that I carried and my face.
No, it was just your face. Your
It
tone
was
has always been
okay.
friendly, but your face.
Okay. So it's just my face, right?
Yeah.
And I've received feedback sometimes that I can get a little bit intense when I'm really working on something. And so I don't have to, but I've chosen for the sake of getting along with other people because I think that's fundamental to doing a good job with all the things that I touch and all the people that I come in contact with. I've I have worked on changing my face, how I show up into those spaces. Is it subjective? 100%. So absolutely subjective. Those people don't know what's going on in my mind. But because it's subjective, is it something that I could change? Yeah. And is it fundamental to getting along better with people? I think so. And so I've chosen to change those things.
It actually kind of goes with why the color of the rack is important to me. Um, it's I think aesthetic is very, very important. Energy that something gives off is extremely important. It kind of, and so if it's something that's going to go on my counter, something that's going to be visible in my living space, I want it to be something that will be aesthetic, something that will add to the, I guess, vibe or the essence or the spirit I'm trying to create. It needs to flow. It needs to have a cozy, homey, inviting image. Not necessarily it has to be perfect, but it can't disrupt it. Um, and so there are things like functionality wise, no, it's not going to affect it at all. But when it comes to, and functionality wise, is a really big deal whether or not you're smiling. It can be to some people, like it could be, it might not be. Um, but the thing is, like, there's always something. First impressions are important, and there's something to be said for um not appearance, but presentation. There's really something to be said for that. Um, like how many clothes do people buy that are such crap and they fall apart so easily, but they look cool. They look fun, they look cool. Presentation goes a long way. And so when it comes to presentation, you do want to hear those as much as as well, not as much as, but you do want to give those weight. Um, a, a, along with the functionality reviews. You know what I mean? Like the feedback you want to take into account the presentation as well as the functionality.
Yes. Sorry, if I'm being distracting, it's because a massive bug. It wasn't this big, but it was
Was
like
it
one of
Jeff?
those. No, it wasn't.
It was Jeff.
It was like one of those massive centipede things. Just walked across the wall and tap.
Uh-oh.
And I'm like, my feet are off the ground now.
Ah,
I'm like,
ah.
I hate these things. I vacuum them up. When you vacuum them up, their legs just go flying off.
Oh, yeah. Earlier I got distracted because my computer battery said it was low, so I had to plug it back in.
I was not surprised to hear Naomi take exception to the color of the dish rack there, nor was I the slightest bit surprised that she really notices, Jason, when you and I are straight faced versus engaging and all of that. And this is one of the this is I think this is why God gives us the two genders he does. Um, I saw this thing the other day that says women see like 50 different shades of colors that men don't see, right? So, you get the 50 shades of gray. Women see 50 shades, men see two, right? you know, and
Oh,
they pick up on
gotcha.
all these subtleties. And I saw it too, like as we were getting ready to move here to Arizona. My bride wants to go to all these different stores and look at all these different drapes and sofas and stuff like that.
Mm.
I don't see the difference from one to the next as long as it's comfortable to sit on. But she's like, "Oh, no, no, that's not right." And I'm like, "Can you tell me why it's not right?" She's like, "You wouldn't understand."
You
I'm
wouldn't.
like,
Oh,
I'm
it's
like, "I
too
Well,
don't."
good.
and for me, aesthetic is important for me too, right? So,
Yeah.
um, as I was looking at these dish racks, I was like, I'd really like something that's in wood instead of just
Plastic
some
or
sort of
metal.
metal,
Yeah.
plated metal, because it's just like, ugh, I don't want to live in that environment. But at the same time, then I went to functionality of like, well, do I want to put it together? And then I was like, is there space for it? Right? All these other things, all of which I recognize is not the manufacturer's problem. And so I would never take to the internet and say, I cannot believe that the shade of wood that I saw on a picture across the internet, manufactured across the damn world, shipped like is just not quite
It's not the
right. I
same
would
color in my kitchen.
It's like, of course it's not. Like that's it's part of the process. Some people don't want to go through the process and blame the manufacturer or the person delivering the message. Say, well, I didn't like your message and how you delivered it. It's like, okay, well, it could be
Oh,
you.
You know, though, Jason, I think this is a sign you need to be on TikTok more because then the Chinese really could see the interior of your home and they could make
yes.
products that
And
are
they
more
could. They could
appropriate.
personalize it just for you. Just for you. Okay, but to your point, I actually oh, I went through something over the last couple of days that has been a huge hit. Like, more crying than I've done in a long time. It's been a huge hit to me. But something that I have come to realize about this huge hit is that, Jason, to your point of it's not necessarily you shouldn't bash the people who delivered it, not the people who like it's not. Sometimes it comes from the wrong like sometimes the person that it comes from you're gonna feel offended at how they delivered it or it's not what you wanted or it doesn't look the way that you thought it should or and I've that's basically been the whole thing is it's not what I thought it would be. Something I was changed in my church we have um different roles we fill different service areas. And for me, I have been over the young women. I've been one of the leaders over the youth program and I've been over the young women and it's been such a fulfilling experience for me with this group of other ladies involved in it and these young women. And it's been so fulfilling. But the leader of our congregation, he said, listen, we're going to take you out of there. We're going to put you somewhere else. And I usually we serve usually these leadership positions are like 3 years or so. So I was thinking I had 2 good years left. And it came out of left field and I was devastated. But I know that there are going to be opportunities to serve in the new place that I'll be serving in. And it's not necessarily the leader of the congregation who decided it. Um, Ultimately, he was the person who gave me the information, and it's not what I wanted. I got taken from something before, I'm not in the role that I'm not in the capacity that I wanted to serve in, but there will be opportunities to get to know other people as well. And I can still look for what I want and look for the things that I need where I am going. And I think it's also important to the one, the delivery, like who's giving it to you, that's gonna be you can't blame them for giving you something for not reading your mind, right? But the other point is that I would like to make is that I'm still gonna find something. I'm still gonna find joy. I'm still going to find love and unity in the new place that I'm looking. And I think when it comes to criticism and feedback, with all feedback, there's something that we can take from it. There's something useful we can get from it. Whether it is someone who is just pissy at us, who just wants to tear us down, there's going to always be some nugget we can find that will benefit us. Whether it's doing the opposite of what they said, whether it's, one thing they said is like, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that. I'm not going to let them know that I, took something good from their feedback." Like there's always going to be something. And so I think there's going to be feedback to take and feedback not to take. But I think from every single piece of feedback, there's probably going to be at least one little nugget, one way you can find positivity and propulsion in your journey.
Mhm. Yeah, the sages say, even in the darkest cloud, we must find the glint of light. And that's what you're talking about there is that somewhere embedded in some of the worst feedback we get is something that we can use, something that we can carry forward and say, okay, well, at least now I know what not to do. Or at least I can see now I've seen, right, what the lengths people will go to oppose, not like in a military opposite, like active fighting sense or anything, but just to register their displeasure that someone else is doing something, that someone else is fixing a problem that they just want to sit there and complain about. Um,
Mhm.
we have to be prepared for that. We have to be prepared for, um, because really, like, just to circle back to the initial question, are you ready to be an entrepreneur? The reality is anybody is ready to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody is ready to accept the responsibility and the ownership that goes along with that. If you're a human being, you can be an entrepreneur, but not every human being wants the job, the responsibilities, the downside, the negative feedback, the well-meaning people telling you, blowing smoke up your butt or blowing smoke in your face. Um,
Yeah, I
not everybody wants to do that.
from my experience, a lot of entrepreneurs get into business because they want freedom, and not want to work for anybody. I'm tired of
Mhm.
working for the man. I'm gonna work for myself, which is an interesting phrase. I'm gonna work for myself, and it's incomplete. You not only work for yourself, but you work for your customers. You work for your vendors because you interact with them and have transactions with them. You work for your investors, whether monetarily or through their lives. If you have a significant other, that person is an investor in your journey, in your business.
Mhm.
Your children are investors. You're investing their time, their energy, their efforts, the time you would have spent with them now on this venture. So you don't work just for yourself. You now have more responsibility. You now work for more people, more diverse people than
Mhm.
you would have if you went out and got a job, were told what to do, you did your thing at 8 a.m. and you left at 5 and walked away for the weekend. Entrepreneurs don't generally get that. And so it takes a certain level of resilience. It takes a certain attitude to be able to stay the course, to be able to determine the direction of the wind and figure out how to navigate. But it is a lot of external forces that an entrepreneur experiences that non-entrepreneurs don't experience. And if that entrepreneur has the attitude of I'm just going to do what I want to do and screw y'all, everyone will leave you at some point in time, or you will gather around yourself all these people who just make your life miserable. So I think there is something in this idea of if you're ready to be are you ready to be an entrepreneur? Because you're not going to be in it because you're not working for anybody. You're ready to be in it because you believe that you can manage your you can manage those um, external and internal all the external and internal forces better than having somebody maybe manage them for you.
And something to take into account when taking on entrepreneurship is, to your point, Jason, of you, all the people around you who are investing in you, the people who care about you. For that exact reason, entrepreneurship is so, so fragile and it's so vulnerable because it it largely not depends on, but it in, involves the relationships in your life, the most precious relationships in your life. And so it's not a matter of you're going to be working for yourself. It's a matter of how are you going to take their investment and in you and honor that. You can't just be flippant with it. You can't just be disregarding and being like, oh, I'm going to work for myself. Because no, you're not just working for yourself. You're literally putting your relationships on the line. Um, you really are. And it's such a vulnerable position to be in. It's such a vulnerable position to be in. But there's a lot of freedom in that too, because if you have really strong relationships and if you honor the investment that those people are putting into you, you will you will find that freedom. You will find the freedom to soar with those relationships, to enhance them far more than you ever could have imagined. But if you're not coming from the right headspace of taking those and honoring them and reverencing them the way that they should be, you're going to find yourself very lonely. You might find monetary success, but I think it could be a very lonely journey where you're
Yeah, I love what you talked about with vulnerability. Vulnerability, when we talk about that in today's society, it seems that it's always about how we're projecting out. But a lot of vulnerability in the case in I think what we're talking about here. Oh, there's a little one in the back. Hi, little one. Um, so a lot of vulnerability is about what we're taking in and how we can be changed or supported or potentially damaged. And for instance, of that is, I live in a town where the downtown is struggling quite a bit, and a lot of businesses open and close nearly immediately within a year, 2 years, 3 years, and sort of in epic fashion as well. I mean, they're losing tons of money, and uh, and I and it's interesting to me that the announcements of new businesses that open up are always by the people who have the least to lose. So the uh, government entities which assist some businesses getting opened, they are evaluated on how many businesses they can help through their program and get open. Doesn't mean that business is going to be successful. They're not evaluated on the how long did that business stay in business. That's not a metric. And so they are glad handing each other about, hey, a new business opened downtown. And I'm looking at them going, yeah, to go out of business and you're going to ruin that person's life for a moment, or hurt them in some way because you're not invested in the same metrics that that entrepreneur is invested in.
Mhm.
And I've seen that happen so many times. So to me, that vulnerability, the vulnerability I think entrepreneurs need to think about is, who are you allowing around yourself and how are they affecting you? Are they invested in the same metrics that you're invested in? And what weight do you give to their opinions? Because support that comes in that is not invested in the same metrics that you're invested in is not support that you're thinking of. You are speaking different languages. And so when it doesn't work out, they're going to be like, well, they're still successful in their position, but you lost your business. That
Mhm.
is huge. And so I think entrepreneurs need to carefully consider who they surround themselves with, not only mentors to follow, but peers to walk with, and then somebody to teach. And who they're mentoring. I think it's that trifecta which creates a really solid or a more solid infrastructure, social infrastructure that can help you be more successful or help entrepreneurs be more successful down the line.
I want to add something here. I think is worth saying, and because there might be people watching or listening to this who currently are working for the man, right? Working for a company somewhere, and yet they're wondering, well, um, what do I have to do? I have to walk off the job in order to assume that mantle of responsibility so that I can prove that I'm an entrepreneur. And I don't think we want to send that message. As a matter of fact, I want to share that, looking back now, I believe I was an entrepreneur long before I owned my own business. I believe I was an entrepreneur in several jobs I held. I believe I was entrepreneurial in the military. I believe I was entrepreneurial as an insurance salesman. Um, I believe I was entrepreneurial as a student, finishing my university degree and working in radio stations. And here's the metric, and it's not a metric like a accounting metric, but it's a measurement, I guess you would say. Here's one of the ways you know. Um, I was always blown away in all of those situations at how much trust I engendered from people who were over me, people who were on par with me, and people who were under me. I just had an awful lot of leeway. Like it was stuff I could do, say, get away with that other people couldn't. Um, when I was wearing the uniform, I could joke around with the first sergeant, who was 3 ranks above me, and tease him and rib him. And the other NCOs who were standing there were shocked and they were aghast and they're like, "You're going to get us in trouble." I'm like, "No, I'm not." He was laughing, you know. Um, and I had
Delivery is everything.
employers, right? And I had employers in the insurance business who were like, "You go do your thing. I got other stuff to deal with. You need help, you can come to me and talk to me, absolutely, but I'm not watching you. I'm not supervising you." And what I can see now looking back at it is I had a sense of ownership of those roles. So yes, my health insurance was partially paid by my employer. My taxes were mainly payroll taxes. I couldn't hire people to work under me unless the company hired somebody to work under me, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, all of those back office things were decided for me, preset. I didn't have to think about them. I just enjoyed the benefits or, dealt with the restrictions. But in the role that I was performing, and this is the thing I want somebody who's working as a W-2 to hear, is you can be an entrepreneur right where you are. Take ownership of that role and work it until you work yourself out of a job in a good way, in that they elevate you, or somebody says, "Hey, could you do this for me? Like, I see you're really good at what you do in your work. Could you come and do it for me on the side?" And you do it on a consulting basis. Now you got a side gig. Now you got a business. Now you got something where there's enough momentum and traction there to say, I could go do this independently and earn all the money, make my own hours, and get the freedom that I'm longing for. And that's the measurement I would put to it, is how much ownership do you have of that W-2 job you're working right now? Even if all it involves is pushing a broom. Do you take it seriously? Because if you do, then sooner or later the right people are going to notice.
Yeah. That's why you could get away with joking with your first sergeant, because you're respectful enough and you take care of your duties enough that you can, things will fly. It's gonna fly.
Yeah, they knew, right? He
Mhm.
he had talked to me enough to know that when he would walk up and I'd say, "Will you quit micromanaging us? We're doing just fine over here." He'd play along. He's like, "I'm not coming over here to micromanage. I just want to say hi." And and all that. So yeah, it was not, but the others were shocked, that I could get away with that. And I'm like, "Yeah, but there's trust."
Mhm.
I didn't say that at the time, but that's what was making that whole thing possible. If there
That's
wasn't
when you're
any
just like,
trust, I
"I'm
would have never said
special."
that to him. Yeah. If there wasn't any trust, I never would have said it,
Right.
you know? So,
Reading
Well,
the room.
we're coming up on the end of our hour here. This is I think, a very important topic that people need to think about before they're becoming an entrepreneur, because you may already a have an entrepreneurial spirit exactly where you're at.
Mhm.
And so I love what you talk about, Paul, that evaluate where you're at right now. Are you engendering respect, autonomy, ownership in the things that you're doing? Because if you're not doing it where you're at, it just gets more difficult down the line. So don't jump off don't start building your own bridge unless you're, you know, willing to help somebody else build their bridge. I don't even know where I was going with
took
that.
the words right out
That
of
was
my
a weird
mouth.
one. But
Can't
but
be
then
faithful in
also,
small things, you're not gonna be faithful in big ones.
for sure. And then don't
Yep.
jump off into entrepreneurship because you think you're not going to work for anybody, because the truth is you're going to work for everybody and then some. And you will juggle more responsibility than you thought you ever had.
Mhm.
And so to maybe wrap it all together, I think one of the important topics is, who are you being mentored by, who can show you the way? And then who are you walking with, who's already on that same journey that you can learn from and find support in, because it's a lonely journey. Your friends and family might not get it, uh, particularly if they've never been entrepreneurs. And then who are you able to teach? Because the old adage of you don't really know something until you can teach it is very true.
Mhm.
So I think those three things, couple them all together, are a good starting block. Evaluate those three things, and then that might point you to whether you're really ready to be an entrepreneur.
Hmm. Exactly.
All right. Well, Paul, one of the visions that came to my mind when you said the sages say was you as Gandalf. I'm hoping that I get to see you someday as an 85-year-old, 90-year-old man with a staff, a
A
long beard,
long white beard.
walking through the deserts of Arizona. The sages say
Yes.
I want to do the
in
scene
every
where he comes in.
cloud.
The staff needs to be like a big rain stick from one of those, those cacti. And that's what the staff needs to be made out of. A really
I like it.
long.
I like it, but I want to do the scene where he comes in and he says to the villain, "Be silent. Put your forked tongue back behind your teeth. I have not passed through fire and death to bandy crooked words with a wicked, witless worm."
You you have the perfect voice for that. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been the workshop. Every Tuesday, we have the entrepreneur workshop where we talk about topics that are important for entrepreneurs to evaluate. And sometimes we have entrepreneurs on who we will talk about their individual ideas and concepts. Also catch the live events periodically on YouTube and LinkedIn. And head to thinkergrowth.com. If you need a mentor, you need somebody to walk with, or you need somebody to mentor, thinkergrowth.com. Thanks everybody for being here.